Vinny on?
Who's Vin? He's from the broker?
Yes. He's not.
If he's not on, I can call him from another phone.
And John, who's the broker on for us?
It's Gowrie.
Gowrie, yeah, in Westbrook. And John, these policies all renewed on 12/31?
Correct. We're bound before that, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so they don't match our fiscal year. They're obviously calendar year policies.
Yeah. Right.
So, John, while we're waiting, could you just one of the questions I had was why we have marine general liability policy coverage now, but didn't have it last year or the year before.
So we have, while Gateway was active in the terminal, I believe that they carried that insurance. Once we removed Gateway from the terminal, it became our responsibility.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then they'll take it on again when they're back in their position. Right, John?
Got it.
Correct.
And I presume from the budget that the premiums that are attributable to the Steep Pier project then go in as a soft cost against that project, right? And it's not running through our budgeted P&L.
Jim, do you want to explain that?
Sure. Actually, the entire number for the policy is $207,000, and that's a calendar year total for everything, including operations and all of the various coverages required for the project. So a little skipping ahead, what we ended up doing was looking at this and saying, well, because so much of it, actually $187,000 of it is for the project, that's going to be capitalized. And the balance between the $187,000 and the total $207,000 is charged to operations, which you'll see in a little bit gave us more than a $90,000 relief in operations.
Is capitalized? I'm sorry. Capitalized and therefore comes. Yeah,
that means we charge it to the project, and it becomes part of the overall cost of building the pier. And I mean, it really is just kind of a given that no project can proceed without insurance. And I mean, I'd go to the mat if anybody questions what I'm suggesting here, but this is absolutely appropriate and conservative from an accounting perspective.
Right. So the premiums get paid from bond funds and not operating funds, right?
The premium funds are going to be paid from project funds. There's a little bit of a discussion going on about the best way to handle the payment, but it will not be coming from operating funds.
Okay, that's the most important thing. Because we don't have, as operating, I don't think we'd have it in the operating fund. Don't have that kind of money.
Well, it would create a problem.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're gonna have some belt tightening over the next couple of years simply because we don't really have operating income per se. We've got a stipend coming from the state, but
exactly.
we have to be very, very conservative. But that will be appropriate to capitalize this portion of that premium.
Couldn't agree more.
So, as it turns out, Vin is not going to be able to join us. He's trapped in a car somewhere. But if you guys have further questions, we will certainly forward them on to Vin and get responses from him.
I have one overall question. Because of the size of the premiums involved here, almost $250,000, we had the opportunity to shop this past year?
Yeah, so Vin put together a memo explaining exactly the shopping that he did. Unfortunately, we didn't get a very good response from the industry. He did shop it out to 6 or so different firms, and there was a reluctance to take on the level of risk that the project represented. And so we ended up going with Navigator for the policy, which is the same one we used last year. Is that correct, Andrew?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
But he did take it out to market, but there was an aversion to the kind of risk associated with this project.
Okay, and so the shopping was done by Gowrie.
Correct.
We didn't approach another broker for their resources, right?
No.
I would suggest that next year we might consider. I have a name. I won't give it to you now, but there's another broker that might be very much interested in this. And I think it would be not a bad idea to shop it through another broker if that's. I know we can do that if we get the right broker. So.
John, this is Jim. I'm somewhat familiar with these semi-exotic policies, and a few years ago I was on a project. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, is that the market assessment and shopping was done domestically. I was on a project where we literally ended up going to a co-insurance policy with Lloyd's, and it was obscene. So given we were able to get policy coverage, this is probably a pretty good choice.
Yeah, I hear you.
This is John Flores. For next year, maybe can we have this presentation prior to entering into these contracts, just so that if there's any questions like are being talked now, we could discuss it before. Because my understanding is that these contracts are already been committed, right?
Correct. I think that's right.
Yeah. So I think maybe for next year, if there's a presentation to the finance committee prior to signing off, that would probably be a good thing.
Sounds good.
I wouldn't disagree.
Good comments. Any other comments or questions on the insurance coverage? Okay, moving on to the financial update. Jim, you want to walk through 6 weeks?
Okay, this is a review of actual revenues and expenditures year-to-date December 31st, 2021.
Hey, John, hold on 1 second. Sure. David, did you need a motion to approve this insurance contract, or you do that later, or don't need it?
You know, I don't know, actually. I don't think we planned on doing it. Andrew, John, did we? I don't recall if we've done it in the past, but we might as well take a motion just to get it on the books, I guess.
So we can.
It's already been signed, sealed, and delivered, right?
Yeah. So, I guess my point. What's the point if it's already been entered in?
Yeah.
Previously, it's been to. This is Andrew. Previously, the budget was passed, and within the budget item for the cost of the contract, all of the insurance coverages fell below that budget line item. And so for this discussion, I think it was the fact that there was an increase to the line item that would need to be resolved through the budget modifications process. But certainly for future process, we could bring the policies before the committee or the board prior to selection.
So this is Tom. So as a matter of process, to the extent that something is approved in the budget, that gives John and the authority to enter into those contracts consistent with that budget. Is that what you're telling us?
Correct. And since this was not consistent with the budget, that's why we brought it to the finance committee at this point to explain why we took the actions we did.
Okay.
John's comments, we can certainly bring this to the board prior to binding, to the finance committee prior to binding, and then we can certainly vote on that.
Yeah, I like that idea too. It's a big number.
Yeah. All right, so we target that for December of this year. All right, Jim, take it away.
Okay, this is a review year-to-date costs, revenues and costs as of December 31st, 2001. Our DOT stipend year-to-date is $280,000. Now that is actually recorded on a cash basis. We haven't completely switched over to full accrual. Our lease rent is $1,250,000. Impact fee $78,000. Pilot commission $50,000. So our total revenue year-to-date is $1,658,000. In operating expenses, the first group is salaries, which is year-to-date $149,000, payroll taxes $7,000, fringe benefits $122,000, total salaries related expenses $279,000. Under contractual services, audit was $29,500. Let's see. General contractual services totaled $119,000. Fisherman berth study related was $4,000, and let's see, legal services operating separated from permitting. Operating is $81,000. Permitting was $58,000. In general, we anticipated that permitting would have been done long ago, but nonetheless, we're stuck with that. So, contractual services total is $294,000. Under marketing and business development, advertising is $8,000. Total marketing $9,001. Total contractual services $304,000. Under administrative and general, dues and memberships $10,000. Office maintenance $15,000. Rent $13,000. Water, sewer, and fire $27,000. A little more than we anticipated because we're actually paying the runoff charges from New London. And let's see, insurance liability is $25,000. Total administrative general expenses $102,000. Total operating expenses $685,000. Our net surplus year to date is $982,000, but we do anticipate that significantly being reduced because the majority of our revenues are been received and reported.
You mean 972,000, or just not 98?
I'm sorry. I meant 972,000 exactly. Thank you, John. Sorry, I misspoke. Any questions on that before I move on to the revised budget?
I have one comment.
Sure.
I think it'd be useful. I'm presuming that in our budgeting process, we also budget by quarter or month, and to the extent that we could have a year to date against that budget, I think it's just easier to read, so we don't have to kind of do the math for each line.
I agree completely. I couldn't agree with you more. We're actually going in that direction. Who am I applauding? What's your talking?
That was Tom Patton.
Oh, Tom Patton. I completely agree. We're actually in the process of breaking things down into monthly buckets so that the reporting structure would represent both the budget year to date as broken down month by month, and we anticipate actual year to date month by month. So your comment is near and dear to my heart. That's absolutely the direction that we're going in. We haven't worked the bugs out yet. We're still trying to get things to represent things in line with what you're suggesting there, which is a more traditional, normal approach. But I completely agree with what you're suggesting there. Absolutely appropriate. Any other comments?
Yeah, just to add on to what Tom said, could you also give us monthly cash on hand report?
No reason why we can't do that. Sure, cash on hand.
Yeah, that was my second comment.
Okay, perfect. So the traditional, because we're dealing with three primary channels, I'm going to suggest that we're going to do operating, bond, and project funding.
even
and
better.
I think that would give you, because there's no point in reading the 15 escrow accounts because the balances are virtually meaningless. Would that be sufficient if I present operating bond and project funding on hand?
I think for me that would be perfect.
Yep.
And Tom, is that okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Operating cash and restricted. Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. Anybody else? I don't want to rush anyone.
So I guess our biggest variable on the expense side is the legal. Is that fair to say?
Well, it's significant, but the biggest variable, and it's number 11 on the list of 12 changes here, we recaptured $94,000 in the insurance liability relative to the policy that we just got. The total was $207,000, and $187,000 of that was directly to that project. Now, I'm skipping around a little bit, but to answer your question, our original budget for liability, which we're basically just saying excludes the vehicle, was $115,200, and based on my allocation, the cost to operations is only $20,000. So that $94,000 difference, we've distributed in other areas where we had surprises. But it'll all make sense in about 7 minutes when I run through this list. But I'm perfectly happy to keep talking on whatever issues you're interested in. So to start, our overall anticipated change to the budget, we recaptured $118,000, and of course, $94,000 of it is that one line item. But starting from the top, salaries, taxes, and fringe benefits were significantly lower because of the finance director absence. So salaries, we recaptured $89,000. Payroll taxes, we recaptured $15,000, and fringe benefits, we recaptured $64,000. That's a hefty sum right there. We did have an increase in audit charges of $4,500, contractual services of $21,500 increase, and I've noted here that I think that has something to do with the Audubon Society. Right this second, I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it looked right on Friday. Now, the fisherman berthing study, we received $144,000 to cover that berthing study. Now, as it turns out, they only spent $81,000 because it was cash receipts, cash disbursements. We have to give a refund, and that was completely unexpected. So we have a $63,000 increase in it's either a revenue nor an expenditure for this period. It's a negative expenditure because of a refund that we didn't really capture in terms of the year-end audit. But that's
who did we have to give the refund to?
It's going to go back to Orsted. So basically, the Deepwater Wind promised $3 million to the city of New London to help with their commercial fishing industry.
Yep.
And so the Orsted asked if we would administer those funds, and so we only asked to draw down the amount of the contract for the fisherman's berthing study, and that was $144,000. But of that, they only spent $81,000. So our plan is to return the balance to Orsted so that they can work directly with the city on the remainder of that balance of the $3 million.
Was that our initiative, or did they ask for it?
I believe that Orsted asked us to play that role.
Okay.
In that instance.
Okay, next item is legal permitting. As I said before, we didn't really anticipate such a long, drawn-out affair relative to permitting, so we've increased the line item budget for $65,000. Advertising, we recaptured simply because we haven't spent that amount of money lately. It's reduced by $7,500. And let's see, board member travel, the COVID pandemic continues. Originally, maintenance. We anticipated an $18,000 expenditure for the renovation of the suite here, and we only spent $15,000, so we recaptured $3,000. Now the big dog here, the $94,000, we recaptured simply because the original budget number was $115,000, and because so much of that that Vin gave us would be capitalized, it's not part of operating expenditures. So we recaptured $94,000, and even I think because the policy was so big, the vehicle insurance was lower than we anticipated. You know, like the what do you call it, the bundles and such. So the total decrease in budget is $118,617. Now keep in mind that we originally anticipated having a $39,000 surplus. So those two added together, not in front of me, but
158, something like that.
Okay, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, so we're definitely better off than we were. At the same time, it's a budget. We anticipate changes between now and the end of the year, and we're going to be tightening our belt as best as we can. Does anybody have any questions? You want me to explain anything further? We've beaten that liability, that insurance thing to death. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Great, thanks, Jim. So I'm going to entertain a motion and a second to recommend to the full board that list of budget adjustments that Jim just went through. Is there?
I'll make that motion.
John's our second.
Second, Tom Pat.
Second by Tom. Thanks. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. OPM update. Jeff, I know you have just one brief item to share. Yes. Our Chief Financial Officer, Kim Kennison, continues to work with the Executive Director, Mr. Henshaw, on the Finance Director recruitment. That recruitment has not completed yet. So the MOU that we've been working under for that and other advice around the finance issues expires at the end of this month, and we are proposing to extend it for 2 more months to the end of March to make sure we complete all that process and wind up the recruitment for a finance director.
And have we had interviews yet? Yes, right?
That I don't know. John will have to speak to that.
So we have not had interviews the latest round of resumes that we took in.
We have or haven't?
Have not.
Okay.
And I don't think we don't have the revised MOU, even though it's just date. We didn't have it on today's agenda, so unless anyone seriously objects to it, what we'll probably do is further discuss this at the board briefly, make sure everyone understands our intent, but adopt it at our February meeting retroactive to the first of that month. And we've done that from time to time related to this MOU. It's just a continuation of ongoing activities, unless someone has a strong opinion otherwise.
And Jeff, to the extent that we would need those services going beyond 2 months, I presume that's not a barrier. I'm skeptical that we could have a finance director in 2 months.
What we've done with this MOU since its inception is we've periodically extended it for relatively short periods to give ourselves little milestones to shoot for, rather than have an open-ended kind of arrangement. We're, to some folks' way of thinking, certainly mine, I'll say, probably beyond the time that we should have been doing this with this authority, but we will continue to be of service where we can and see if we can move that along. But 2 months seems to be the where we landed.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Any further comments or discussion on that? Okay. Any old business for the Finance Committee?
David, this is John. I just wanted to make one more comment on the budget adjustment. There was a question about the effect on the cost of living adjustments on the budget. Those are included at 4% in the salary budget line item and the adjustment there too. So I know that the committee was interested in what the impact of those cost of living adjustments was, and it is, as I said, reflected in the revised budget.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thanks for closing the loop on that. I think one other piece of information that might be helpful associated with that, it's a little hard to distill it from the budget adjustment since we obviously had lag money associated with the unfilled vacancies. If you could just maybe share with the committee via email the cumulative salary increase associated with the 4% across the board, just so that folks understand the magnitude by which salaries will now be baked in with an increase going forward.
Will do.
Any other questions or comments on that? Okay. Any new business?
David, before we, this is new and old business, and it's a question I'd like to address to Jeff. Hey, Jeff, are we at one point were going to ask OPM to release to us what the amount of the unexpended funds were for some of the dredging projects that went way back. And yeah, it's my understanding that OPM doesn't want to release those numbers to us. Is that still true?
No. You have a report that our consultant gave a couple months back of the historic maritime bond funds that lays out in excruciating detail that there's something like $12 million that's either unallocated or unallotted. What we will do with that number going forward is something that's under review in terms of new capital recommendations that we'll make to the General Assembly. I think I've said either in this committee or before the full board, I can't recall, that the cleaner, more transparent course of action may be if there's interest in new authorizations for bond funds that we approach the General Assembly with that, as opposed to trying to rely and go back and shoehorn some new need into some historic language from a bond authorization 10 years ago. That, from an accounting standpoint, the thing to do is probably to deauthorize all of those and then ask for new stuff, and so that we can lay it out cleanly and plainly. Here's the authorization for this project. That said, I think everyone knows there's lots of recent authorizations that were made in the last bond act for projects. I believe New Haven got some money. Obviously, the Pier project is state has a massive commitment to the Pier project. Quite a lot of bond funds have been put toward maritime purposes in this administration. I would say an historic amount. And going forward, if there's new interest or need for projects, that we probably ought to tee that up for new authorizations with the General Assembly. That's my advice, and I think that might be where we are going to land. But as I say, that's all under review.
So I think in summation, if there's $12 million of unexpended dredging money, you're thinking about using that for going forward?
No.
Asking? No.
Okay. This is the equivalent of couch cushion money, right? It was authorized in the past for whatever reason did not get allocated or did not get allotted. It was for projects that folks had in mind back in the day, but which never came to fruition or just didn't get allocated or allotted for whatever set of reasons.
Or how about unexpended? If a project was budgeted for $400 and it only took 200, then there was only 200. There's 200 presumably left of unspent allocated money.
Yeah, it's a complicated, and I tried to walk this through in the last meeting or two. It is a complicated process by which bond funds get to agencies. But if an agency still has the money, then it's up to that agency to do with it as they will. But what I think we identified was the $12 million had either been unallocated, in other words, it hadn't gotten to the agency, or it hadn't been allotted to the agency, which is another step that has to take place. And that since those are historic authorizations going back many years, to try and associate those with some new need or new project is probably not the most transparent thing to do.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. I guess one other question too, Jeff, if you don't mind me continuing to ask you. If and this refers to a town on the Connecticut River. If they have the available cash to do a project that there's some need for it to be done ASAP, is there any precedent to having the town expend their funds and then requesting a reimbursement by CPA, in the next calendar year or the next dredging cycle or the next cycle?
Well, as I think we all recall, we did a round of SHIP grants last year, the Small Harbor Improvement Project program.
Yep.
And we approved a new process by which SHIP rounds will be allocated. And I believe we moved to a reimbursement model. So I guess I'd ask John to take that question in terms of whether going forward, how that's going to work, and would a scenario like Johnson described be something the town might avail itself of for SHIP?
So SHIP would be an appropriate vehicle for applying for funds. Correct.
For reimbursement funds.
Correct.
Okay.
John,
obviously they would. Yeah, I'm sorry.
John, this is Joe Salvatore. I think what not John Henshaw, John Johnson is asking, can the town go ahead right now, expend funds on a dredging project, and then come back to us at a later date requesting reimbursement of those funds?
Thank you, Joe.
So no, is the short answer to that question. That would be inconsistent with our SHIP policy.
Right, and the Port Authority would not be under contract with the town to give them the reimbursement.
Okay. That's helpful information. Thank you.
Any other new business? All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, and we'll see everyone in an hour.
So moved.
But John's our second.
Second.
Parker. Second by Parker. Great. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you at the regular meeting at 12.
Thank you.